I always say this. I know that I always say this, but I have, of course, another beautiful freaking guest for you guys to get to know and share their wisdom of the world. It's my dear sister Katie. I cannot wait for you to listen to this episode. I probably sound like a broken record every time you guys watch these intros, but you know how much this just lights my soul on fire to be able to bring something to you and amplify other voices out there on what it means to be human, what it means to be healing, what it means to be taking that path that just makes you feel like you are flying despite the pain and the discomfort that we're all experiencing. Katie, to me, is literally a walking ball of sunshine and such a channel. I've had the honor to work with her multiple times, receive tarot readings from her, and just have her as my friend to be able to learn from her and grow from her and have her reflect things back to me that sometimes I need, and sometimes I just need that little gentle reminder. And it's always beautiful to have a person like Katie in your corner cheering you on, and I'm so excited for you guys to listen to this episode, get to know her. Definitely go book a tarot reading with her. She's absolutely incredible. And shoot us a comment down below or DM us on Instagram to let us know how you enjoy this episode. And without further ado,
I follow my shadows into the void, into the space where no one goes. Toes on water, I let go to sink in the depths of this black hole. The atoms swirl, infinity surrounds me. Starlight moves like incense around me. Eyes closed to see the magic before me. All that I am, all that I will be.
hi Katie, welcome.
Hey Shay, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really, really good, thank you. Really good.
Good. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you today, all the way from Singapore, which is so cool. Okay, I would love to just have you introduce yourself to those that are watching and joining us in this conversation today, and we'll go from there.
Okay, it's interesting. Like, how does one actually introduce themselves? I feel like I've been changing so much in the last year or so, but bring it back down to basics. My name is Katie. I'm 28 years old. I live in Singapore at the moment, but I spent most of my life over in the UK. I went to boarding school when I was about 11 years old and had sort of stayed there all the way through after uni and working. And halfway through 2019, I moved to Australia to go traveling. And it's so funny because I checked in with myself before I decided to go traveling, and I was like, right, am I running away from something, or what are my intentions, what's happening before this big transition? And I looked around and like took stock of my life back then, and I was like, I love my job, I love where I live, I love my friends, I'm in such a good place in myself and where I am now, and it's not even that I could possibly ask for more, but I'm so grateful for where I am right now, but I'm just open to this transition. And I had this question come up where I was like, okay, as much as I love all of these things and they feel like such a big part of me, who am I without the label of living in Brighton, without the label of working for this particular company, without the label of, this specific group of friends? And I didn't know the power of that seed that I was planting, because fast forward 6 months, when I was in Australia with my partner at the time, we bought a van, we converted it, we were traveling around, having the best time on paper. And I started completely losing semblance of who I am and what I wanted. And I found myself being really unhappy and questioning a lot. And then around that same time, my partner and I realized that we were much more friends than lovers. So I then was going through a breakup. And then I started getting really sick with this condition called Topical Steroid Withdrawal, which is all over my Instagram, so I won't go too much into it. But essentially, in a nutshell, I'd been using prescribed topical steroids to treat my eczema on and off throughout my life, not knowing that they were really poisonous and that I was effectively becoming addicted to them. So they'd work for a while and then they'd stop working, and I'd go to the GP and they'd give me a stronger steroid. And that's just how eczema was managed. Anyway, long story short, I decided to stop using them because they weren't really working, and my skin went mental. And it wasn't just my skin, like my vision was really messed up for a bit. I couldn't walk for a little bit. So, you know, needless to say, all my travel plans went out the window, and I ended up coming back home to Singapore, where I'm super lucky to have, you know, a family that I can come home to and depend on and have that support. But that then spurred on this huge well of shadow work and returning to a lot of trauma. And it's funny, like being on this healing journey where there are certainly some points where it's important to realize sometimes you can't heal in the environment that broke you. And there's so much sacredness in accepting that and taking time to be away from it and heal and grow and understand who you really are outside of that environment. But there comes a time where you have to return, or it's a divine time where you return, and it's this beautiful but very, very deep transformation and return to self and return to the source of who you really are beneath all of it. And it's not easy, and it's certainly something that it's probably, in a way, it's easier to run away from, but eventually it does catch up with you. But yeah, so I've been going through this huge healing process, both physically and emotionally and spiritually and mentally, and just it's been a crazy year. I know it has been for 2020 has been mental for so many people. And yeah, for me, it was just from all angles and all dimensions of life. 2020 was this complete clearing of the slate, clearing of all things that aren't me, and a return to just me. Like for the first time ever, I feel like the most me, and it's this real sort of less is more vibe that's coming through. Like the more I know about who I'm not, the more I know about who I am. Does that make sense? So
Totally. Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So many like juicy pieces in there. I loved how you touch upon just like stripping away at the identity that you have around friends or partnership or the job or the city that you come from, because that's how so many people like identify themselves as like a product of their environment. But if you stripped all of that away, what's really there on the inside, right? And that really like brings me to my next question, which is the, you know, premise of this entire talk show is just being human and those different experiences that we have of being human, because at the root core we're all experiencing something the same, but it's showing up differently. And I'd love to hear in like your lens and from your experiences thus far, how would you describe being human?
It's like the most hilarious experience, to be honest. Like sometimes I do, like I'm convinced that we are, well, I don't know what I really think we are, but we are like this human manifestation of source energy, right? That's one way of putting it. And every now and then I'll be like looking at something that's so typically human and just be like, being human is so hilarious. Like it's so ridiculous. And I think like where we are as humanity right now, we're at this really strange turning point where I think people are starting to question themselves so deeply. And as you said, what it means to be human. Like, why are we here? You know, and I think it's something that I have questioned so much throughout my life. Like one of my earliest memories is looking in the mirror being like, if I wasn't here, would I still be here? And my parents are like, why does she have such like a deep sense of self, or like questioning of self? And so I think I was always like a little bit of a strange child, because I was always questioning, what does it mean to be human?
Yeah.
You know, it's such a fascinating question, because I think the answer changes all the time depending where you are. So for me, recently, through this sort of, I guess, most recent shift or transition through my life or my experience of being human, is about undoing, like almost like returning to what you came here as. You know, I feel like part of the syndrome or symptom of being human is that we pick things up and we become so blocked by them, you know, and we become so confused by things that feel big. And I think the beauty of this human experience is to go on that journey where you return to this remembrance of like, I'm here to experience this. Like really the whole purpose of being human is to experience all of these things, not to get hung up on them or develop, you know, I don't know, I get this idea of like building castles on the sand. You know, that's kind of what we tend to do as humans, where we put so much importance on a certain thing happening to us. And really, it is a castle in the sand, and it's going to crumble away eventually, because we are like these ephemeral, constantly changing beings. So I think the more we can remind ourselves, like, we are here to experience, process, regenerate constantly. You know, it is just about taking in all of this experience. And just enjoy the ride, you know, rather than and it's so much easier said than done to be like, go with the flow. As much as we want to tap into that flow state, like there's this hilarious contradiction where we get into the flow state and we're like, right, how do I hang on to the flow? And it's like, you've ruined it. Like, yeah, so probably like the most wishy-washy answer, but I don't know if I'm there yet with a definitive answer of what it means to be human. But for me, that's what it is right now.
I love that. And I think it really is about being in the experience of life. Like, we're meant to experience happiness. We're meant to experience the sadness and the anger and the pain in a way that allows us to really live, is how I feel. And like, when you really allow yourself to be in the experience of your life, then that's like, to me, it's like, okay, that's where the breakthrough happens, where you're like, fuck, like, this is how grand life can feel, even though this was shit for like a month, 2 months, 3 months. And it's like, but when you come out on that other side and you let yourself really be in the experience, I think that's really potent and powerful. And I love how you touched upon just when we're in the experiences, like, you can hit this flow state of being in your life and in your own words and viewpoint. Like, how do you cultivate that, and how would you suggest others find their version of it,
of the flow state? I think it is about it definitely takes work. It definitely takes shadow work, more specifically. And when I say shadow work, I mean looking back at things that have occurred in life that are keeping you tethered, that are keeping you stuck in a certain point of time, because that's what's blocking you from experiencing the present moment. And I know we read so much about presence and being in the present moment, but I think because it's banded about so much, people forget that really that does take a lot of work. It's not as easy as just say, well, the ironic thing is it is easy, because it's what really does come naturally to us, but we're conditioned to place a lot of importance on the experience that defines us. So really, in order to tap into the flow state, is to continually release definitions that you've picked up. You know, we're almost like these magnets, because we operate from ego. And again, ego is not, it's not a bad thing. It's something that just needs to be understood. And I feel like the more people, if you engage in like a negative discourse around ego, you're just creating even more resistance. If you can soften and understand that it's here to serve, and it's here to protect us, and it's here to give us a sense of purpose, a sense of who we are, then you can begin to relinquish the importance of the need for definition, the need for identity. And you can then step more into like, okay, what does it actually mean to feel this, not about what it, no, not even what does it mean, like how does it feel to feel this, and kind of take the meaning away from it. So I think for me, like tapping into the flow state is really just releasing definitions, releasing expectations, and just really letting go. Like I actually had a friend, I mean, I feel like I've been going through spiritual awakenings like my entire life, and from my understanding that's how everyone is, but obviously it isn't.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, by speaking to a lot more people, it gives me, you know, obviously everyone's journey is so different, but I remember I was going through like another big spiritual awakening after I went through a big breakup of like a long, pretty abusive relationship. And I started tapping into this flow state where I was like, it feels so good not to care about all the bullshit that I used to care about. Like none of it is even that important in comparison to my well-being. And when I say well-being, it's not even happiness, like it's this deep sense of joy and connection to the universe that I hope we have all felt at least once. And when I got into that state, I was really like, oh my God, I don't care. Like, I don't care. And one of my friends was like, you're dissociating. And I was like, I'm not. And I started getting worried. I was like, oh my God, am I actually dissociating? Am I going through some sort of psychosis? But that sense of detachment and the freedom that comes from it, it's not about running away. It's about just breathing away from all of this shit that we really busy ourselves with so much. And I think like, why am I even getting so fussed about this shit? Like it's so irrelevant to how I want to feel, you know, or how I'm meant to be feeling. And I guess that's what creates the contrast. But yeah, I think like just continuing to check in with yourself, being like, is this even part of me? You know, I don't know, questioning the definition, questioning the labels that we get so attached to. Yeah.
I love that. I really, really love that. And you touched upon just like purpose and how when we are attached to like identity or all of this stuff that like you're moving through the world with some sort of purpose. And I feel like we live in a world where purpose often is career, but to me it's like purpose could be your career, but it could be so much more than that. And in that experience and in like touching upon the shadow work and stuff, how would you say like people find their purpose? Because I have a lot of clients and conversations with people who are just like, how did you find your purpose? And I'm like, I don't even know if I really know if I know what my purpose is. I just like followed, for me it was like following each little intuitive nudge, but I'd love to hear it from your lens, because I know the people who are watching this are going to be like, what is purpose?
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, what is purpose? Again, like I really resonate with you saying it's just about following these intuitive nudges, because even for me, I don't know exactly what my purpose is. I don't know exactly what it looks like. I know what it feels like. It feels like I've been in certain, I suppose my advice to other people is think back to times where you have felt like, oh, I love this. I could do this for days on end, and it doesn't even feel like effort. So there have been times in my life where I have been having deep conversations with people where it helps them to open up about you know, traumas that they've experienced, or have that liberating moment where they click, like, oh my God, I behaved this way because of this that happened. And then it's like this burst of liberation and freedom. When I have been able to hold that space for people, it feels so, like I can feel it in my chest, like how beautiful that feels. And really the bottom line is I want to be doing something that significantly helps people. You know, particularly when it comes to like a soul expansion kind of thing, because I feel that people feel so trapped, and that might ironically be because they're trying to align themselves with a purpose that is actually so outside of them. And even though a career in some sort of corporation or making loads of money can be fulfilling in one sense and can fulfill that purpose void that I think is inherently built into every single human, but yeah, actually like bringing that alignment more within. And I know that sounds so like abstract, but really just taking that time to, I suppose actually it touches on what we just spoke about removing those definitions that are actually not part of you, they're outside of you. And it's sometimes like it's easy to start off with by looking at things that really don't align with you, but then you can even take it deeper and look at the things that do align with you, but you're still like, you know what, that's still external. It doesn't mean you have to remove it from your life, but just getting more and more of an understanding that there is nothing external that truly defines who you are. Maybe that's why we get so confused, because there's no true way to define the human spirit, or it's not even human spirit, you know, the spirit, this source energy, you can't quantify it yet, you know, because it's just this completely different dimension. And maybe it's not even meant to be labeled, maybe it's not even meant to be classified, because it's just this pure energy that is only meant to be felt. It's not even meant to be cognized, or, do you know what I mean? I'm so going off into a massive tangent here, but like when it comes to purpose, like I really do feel we have this void built into us, because if you look at what humans do from the dawn of humanity, we have evolved, and like I think we will just continue evolving. There's this amazing book by Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote 3 books all about humanity. One was humanity like back in the Neanderthal times. One is called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, which is all about humanity in the present. And then the third is Homo Deus, which is this idea that humans will eventually become gods, or that we have gods within us, right? And so I do kind of subscribe to that. You know, obviously we have to be like aware of this Messiah complex, but we evolve. That's what we do as humans. We are constantly questioning, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And I think purpose is such an important thing to have that can drive us towards growth and drive us towards, it's like this interesting contrast, isn't it, of like wanting to remain in the present, but also being dedicated to self-development and expansion. So yeah, I'm sure there was an answer somewhere in that waffle.
I love it. I love the tangents because it's just so pure and real.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what it's about. And I think I love how you said, like, as humans, we want to conceptualize everything and want to like place a definition on everything. And it's sometimes like I know, and I'm sure you feel this way, just like the further along in my journey of this experience of life comes along, is like nothing means nothing and everything means everything all at the same time, which is such a paradox. And it's just like, but some things just don't need to make sense, they just are. And I think purpose is kind of one of those things. It's just, it doesn't need to make sense, but if you feel like you're living your life in full alignment as like the most self-expressed version of yourself, like to me, maybe that's just the purpose. Maybe your purpose is just being able to sit underneath the sun and feeling that like being alive. I don't, have you watched the movie Soul yet?
No, it's I think it is out in Singapore, but I've been bugging my sister, being like, we gotta go see it, we gotta go see it. I can't wait.
So good. And I love in that movie how they touched upon purpose, and it reminded me of this conversation where like when they sent the soul off to like find its spark, and one of the other souls was just like, wait, what was her spark, like what was she meant to do or something. She's just like, oh, it doesn't matter, she just like wants to live life, and that's her spark, she's just ready for earth now. And I was like, it really is that simple, to just like living your life in a way that like lights you up. And I love how you touched upon that. And then you said, talking about alignment, and I feel like we're moving into this new way of being as like a human species with everything that happened in 2020, and here in the States especially, so many things on, you know, humanity has been touched upon. Like we have Black Lives Matter movement, we have a new president as of today, which is wild, and like a woman in the White House.
Congratulations.
Like, there's so many things, and it's like, even though here, like, yes, it's in the States, but we're all interconnected. And I feel like in knowing that we're moving into a new stream of consciousness where people are becoming significantly more aware of this life, and that, just everything. And I think the word alignment is really getting thrown out there quite often. And I think, having been working with that word for a little while, I would love for you to touch upon like what alignment is to you and how people can cultivate that alignment for themselves, especially like in a time that we're at, like right now in this current decade.
Yeah, so the card that really comes up when I think of alignment is the Eight of Wands. And it's such a perfect depiction of what that really means to me specifically, because it really is about getting clear on, as you said, what lights you up, you know, what your passions are, and just moving in that direction. That's the best way to describe it. It is about moving in the direction alongside, in alignment with what lights you up, what gets that fire in your belly. And, you know, interestingly, my first job was in recruitment. And I didn't realize that recruitment had such a dreadful reputation, at least in the UK it does. Yeah. And I was there thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. I can help great people get into great jobs with great companies. And, you know, I can speak to people about what they're passionate about doing. Because for me, I cannot understand why. And I get that sometimes needs must and necessities dictate, but I feel so sad at the thought that people will spend their entire lives working at something that they have no passion for. Oh my God, how amazing that I literally can't find this card. I literally saw it yesterday. But yeah, it is really about sort of moving in the direction of what lights you up, what gets that fire in your belly, what wakes you up in the morning going, you know, I'm sure everyone has had that, where they've planned something exciting for the day and they've gone, I want to do that. And, you know, the funny thing is, like, as humans, we put so many no's in our own path. We're like, oh no, I couldn't do that because it's not realistic, or maybe it's, you know, through filters of society or certain judgments that might come up. But actually, my ex-partner is Sagittarius, and he was so much fun and such a wonderful person, and he was so free to do what he wanted to do. I suppose it's like typical Sagittarius traits, but he really loved skydiving, and he was like, oh, when we were in Australia, he was like, oh, I want to get my skydiver's license and, you know, learn how to skydive on my own. And eventually, like, he could be a skydiving instructor. And I was like, that's the kind of thing that people look at and be like, oh my God, that would be such a cool job, but I couldn't do that. And it's like, well, there are skydiving instructors out there, you know, it's not a job that won't be done. And like, people being like, oh, I'd love to be an astronaut, you know, like going back to being a kid, when you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, I want to be a bus driver, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a whatever it is. Can you believe that the card that I was looking for was literally hiding in the box? The Eight of Wands. Like, if you can see that picture, it is literally about moving in the direction of the things that set you on fire. And sometimes, going back to this purpose thing, it might not be just one thing. It might be a number of different things that set you on fire. That's the way to define your purpose, is rather than looking outwardly, being like, oh God, what can I do? What can I do? Look inward. Where are those flames within you? What sets off those sparks? And you go and take that spark and you send it out. It's like going out there with this energy of passion, and and then that's what will lead you there, you know. So yeah, thanks for showing up, card. I love that it was hiding in there. That's so funny.
I love it. And I love that he has like an arrow. I feel like I'm butchering quotes lately, but the ones like, sometimes life is like an arrow where it's going to pull you back first before you shoot forward. And that it reminds me of that too. And that's kind of what it's like, discovering your greater purpose other than the career that you're in life, is that you're gonna, you might have some moments where you fall down, but it doesn't mean you don't keep going. And then going a little deeper, because I feel like anyone watching this would be like, oh my God, that's great. I would love to like follow what lights me up, but how do I even begin doing that? Like, how would I even begin doing that?
how would you suggest people tap into their innate wisdom to follow?
Meditate.
Yeah. Meditation, yes.
Really, like, I mean, I could talk lots and lots about how to get there, but ultimately it's meditation and spending time with yourself, again, outside and away from the distractions. And this is not easy. Again, it's one of those things, because it's talked about so much, we maybe downplay how sacred that is, you know, to spend moments where you are just with your being and what's immediately around you. And some people have resistance to meditation in terms of sitting there for 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever it is because they can't focus, and that's fine. The goal is that you do want to eventually be able to do that, but if that's difficult, I mean, I've had people, for example, who say, oh, yeah, meditation isn't right for me because I just can't sit still for that long. And I'm like, well, that's one form of meditation. You can do, meditation can be anything that is essentially you being fully present in what you're doing right now with you.
Yeah.
And so one of my favorites is walking meditations, or if I'm chopping vegetables. This is something that I love doing. I have like such a semantic attachment to it because my grandmother, I love her so much. She's passed on now. It was almost 8 years actually in 10 days. And she just found the most happiness and contentment in the simplest things. And I used to watch her chopping vegetables, and she was so fully focused. And like I can remember being there on the kitchen table while she's chopping vegetables. And it's not that she was so focused that she couldn't pick up on anything else, but there was just this energy that I picked up on where it was just complete presence. You know, it's not like she was thinking about anything else. She was really like, every single cut would be so perfect because she was so laser focused on doing this task just repetitively, and she was so joyful. And I was like, oh my God. So that was probably my first introduction to meditation before I even knew what meditation was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the way of like really connecting to who you are and what your passions are, again, I suppose it's like twofold. It's going back to that whole releasing of definition of everything that you are not. And that's a big thing. Like that might take a long time because you might even look at the things where you're like, oh yeah, that does define me. But I'm like, but then like with my experiences before I went traveling, it's like, well, actually, that wasn't what defined me. It's what I enjoyed and it's what I loved as part of my life, but it's not what defines me as a person. In fact, probably the further I go along on this journey, the more I'll realize there is nothing that defines me because I am not anything or anyone in particular. I am just here. You know, I'm actually thinking of like Ram Dass and like this quote of like becoming nobody.
Yeah.
You know, what beautiful liberation is that, to become nobody, and but then through that become the most you. I don't know, amazing.
Yeah,
It is
such
a paradox. Like all of this is just a hilarious paradox. And then that brings me back to the first thing where I'm like, being human is hilarious because we're like digging so deep and being like, I need to find these answers. And then you get there and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. It's like there is no answer almost.
Yeah. But then there is like so much wisdom in this journey and so much beauty. And yeah, so I think like almost getting to that stage where you can just keep removing to the point where you can sit with yourself in peace and in calmness. And from there, I feel like you start to get these whispers of what you were really brought here to do, you know, and almost the word do is wrong because it's not about doing, because when we use the word do, I really get this idea of something outside of us, and it is really like, who were you here to be?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yes. What was I? Oh my gosh, I just totally had a brain fart now. I had a question.
I've got this really lame quote in my head, like, you're not a human doing, you're a human being.
But it's just so true.
It's so true. I'm so averse to like cheesy quotes because my partner would be like, you're such a basic bitch. And I'm like, I'm the furthest thing from basic ever. But like, sometimes I'll get these quotes and I'm like, God damn, that makes so much sense, but I'm not gonna fucking quote that. Like,
Yeah.
you're not a human doing, you're a human being.
Yeah, and it's just like, as humans, we just do and do and do and do and do and
Yeah.
do, and
Yeah.
her end almost.
Mm.
Oh my goodness. Well, what was I gonna say? I really cannot remember now, but that's okay. If it comes back to me, then we're meant to have it in this conversation.
Yeah.
If not, then it's okay. I really just absolutely loved your perspective on everything, and I'm so grateful for you to be sharing this wisdom and medicine with other people, because I feel like they'll take a lot away from it, even though this whole conversation might also just be like, wait, what? Like a paradox of everything, but I feel like the right
It didn't actually answer anything.
and that is the truth. Raw
That's it.
it really is it though.
Yeah.
I love it. And I know that you share your wisdom with the world through tarot and working with the shadow and the ego and all of that. And I absolutely love that. And we've touched upon that in this conversation a bit, but I would love for you to share more on this work and the deconditioning of unbecoming what the world made you, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always felt this drive to be connected to other people on a very, very soul level. So, I mean, going back here, when I was a child, my friends would be like, I want to be a bus driver, I want to be an astronaut. And I used to be like, I want to be a psychiatrist. And people would be like, okay, your child is really intense. But I think really what it was when I was a child, I was seeing a psychiatrist, and I thought she was the most compassionate, the most wonderful person. And I was like, wow, I used to see people come in and out of her office, and I thought, what an amazing job to make people feel happier. As a child, that's all I could see. And yeah, so I think I've always kind of held on to this notion, or I've always had this knowing that whatever I end up doing, I will feel most fulfilled when I'm helping people unlock things and become sort of more liberated in who they're meant to be and things like that. But yes, I studied psychology at university. I then came out of uni and I was like, oh, I could either go and do a master's and then become a therapist, but how much credibility does a 25-year-old therapist have? And so I decided to go and live life a little bit and let it chuck me around a bit more. And yeah, I think I developed this real affinity for shadow, or real sort of curiosity for shadow work, because like many people, I have gone through a lot of dark things in my life, and I spent a long, long, long time feeling very trapped by that and feeling like I was in some sort of cycle, some sort of spiral, or that was how my life was always meant to be, because that was what my programming was within the first few years of my life. And I spent a good long time being very, very trapped within those cycles. And I was in a really horrible cycle of self-harm and suicidal ideation. And, to get very, very real, there were many times in my life that I had attempted to take my life. And the last time was at the end of May 2020. So it wasn't all that long ago. And I share about it on my social media because I want people to know that it is very real, and it is very, very, it can be so dangerous when we sign ourselves up to just get on with it and get over it, and this is why, and shadow work is something that has to be approached very carefully and with a lot of reverence and with a lot of intention, because I always like to say it's not a well that you get stuck down at the bottom of and you never come out. It's a portal which you go through, and it's a portal of transformation, and it's a portal ultimately of release and shedding, and learning a huge amount about your resilience and your just about you, and what you can learn as opposed to what you can go through and have it tether you down. So sorry, that's incredibly deep, but I think it is so important for people to take that time, whatever it might be, to go through a process of really releasing the things that have hurt you in your life, whatever that might be. You know, trauma can stem from anything. I read a book called The Emotion Code, and there was one particular woman who, she had a beautiful upbringing, had a beautiful life, but she had this strange feeling of trauma happening in her body. And they traced it back to when she was a baby, and this was years ago, where they used to use cloth nappies and have like a, you know, they used a pin. Her mum accidentally pinned her hip to her nappy and hadn't realized, and this poor baby had spent probably 2 or 3 hours with a pin, you know, in her hip, and that in itself was enough trauma to follow her around her life. So yeah, I think I need to remind myself like of that question now, but like I guess like, yeah, getting into this work, it's more been out of this, it's been out of a soul drive to illustrate the importance that your trauma doesn't have to define you. And truly, like, I work with my with my tarot as well. I work with quite a lot of coaches, and really what I've realized is the best coaches are the ones who have been through and walked the walk and are showing other people to do the same as well. People who are here to authentically express their experience. And it's wonderful that we can take certifications and do courses and all of that, but the purity, the best essence of what you can get from a coach is the purity of their experience and them saying, this is what I went through, because so many other people will resonate with that, because we are, guess what, we're all human, and we are so connected in the ways that we feel things and the ways that we perceive our experience. And so the best people to learn from are the people who have done the same. So I think, yeah, for me, it's really sharing my experience and saying like, hey, I've been there. I'm not saying I'm, you know, a pro at this, but here's my experience. Here's how I got through it. And here is how liberated I feel as a result of it. And I want to tell you, you do not have to be trapped in that for your whole life. This is not what it has to be. You don't have to accept that this is what life has to be if you don't want that. So yeah, it's been incredibly empowering for me to go through that journey by myself and like truly understand a lot more about it. And then naturally magnetize a lot more people to me, rather than me going, right, okay, I need to get a certification, I need to have my degree, I need to work in an office for 5 years, and then I'll set up my practice and have my little name plaque. It feels so much more soul driven to do it by experiencing and then sharing my experience.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm literally inspiring myself right now.
Good. Yes.
So true.
So beautiful, and just thank you so much for your vulnerability and being so real, because you nailed it on the head. Like, sharing these experiences and being so raw and open about it, it's brave. It's brave on so many levels, and it's just such a testament to like the work that you've been doing on yourself. And I love the depiction of just like shadow work is really truly, it's a portal that you go through, and it's an ever lasting portal in my experience. And I was just like, you know, it's always like, to me, the inner work, I can't remember where I heard this, but the inner work is really just learning to love yourself more. And
again and again.
And it's just like each time you move through one of those traumatic experiences or the shadow, it's like you love yourself deeper, and it's so beautiful, and it's definitely not easy. And so I guess my last question on this topic would be, like, this path of doing the inner work and returning to self and whatnot it's not easy, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But for anyone viewing this, because I know those that are tuning into this space, they're energetically connected and they want to do the work. I think everyone wants to do the work, but it's scary. And what is your piece of advice to take that first step, and why?
The first thing is to remember that it will take the same amount of effort either way, whether you decide to do the work or whether you decide to run away from it. If you decide to run away, you know, there's this notion of it sort of coming back to bite you in the bum, or issues relating to not doing the work will continue manifesting in your life. And it is my belief that like eventually that route becomes harder, even though you're, you know, not having to face the demons. Like eventually that becomes harder, and it makes for just an unpleasant way of living, because you're constantly plagued by these things. So yeah, I mean, I think the first step is just to get honest with yourself and make that decision, and to say, like, yeah, okay, I'm ready to be released of that. It's as simple as that. Like, that intention to be released, or to be healed from it, or to no longer be defined by it, more specifically, that I think is the biggest first step. And that is probably something that I continue to incorporate throughout the whole process of shadow work, just returning to that affirmation to say, I no longer am defined by this. And that's probably, like, I'll leave it there, because I think sometimes when it comes to something like shadow work, really less is more when you're approaching it, and just having one powerful affirmation that will keep you through it, that can start your journey, but also something that you can end with. Does that make sense? And you can get to the end of a particular cycle of shadow work and say, I am not defined by that. I'm no longer defined by that situation. And, you know, there's all sorts of amazing tools like journaling, meditation. And again, they get bandied about so much. And so we forget how powerful they really are.
Yeah.
And people have some crazy resistance to it as well. So just do what works for you. I don't journal every single day. I journal when I feel called to do it. I just had a reading last night as well, where my client was really like, I don't journal. And I was like, okay, well, I could see that there was a lot of activation in the throat chakra. So I was like, okay, well, a lot is coming up that needs to be processed. How do you feel about recording voice notes and listening back to them? And she was like, oh, I love that. So I was like, that is a form of journaling. Just whatever gets it out of there into here, do that. So yeah, but I think, yeah, bringing it back is like setting that firm intention of, I am no longer defined by this, and then allowing it to kind of manifest from there.
I love that. I think that's a beautiful first step. And I really love to leave our viewers with resources that come from you and your teachings, or whatever feels relevant to you. So I always just call them rabbit holes. What is like a current rabbit hole right now that you are just like loving learning from?
Weirdly enough, cryptocurrency. Like a completely different tangent, but I just think it is such a perfect definition of how humans can evolve.
Cryptocurrency
Just insanely, right? It really is. And it's like, we're looking, I think, yeah, for me, usually I go down the rabbit hole of, you know, like the power of now is something that I'll always pick up every now and then, because I'm just obsessed with this book. It changed my life, and it continues to every single time I read it. So yeah, that would be a really great rabbit hole to go down. Another really great book is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, and also The Untethered Soul, which is just, yeah, stunning book. Yeah, I've also recently been going down another sort of Abraham Hicks like rampage rabbit hole. Yeah, like more specifically, I'm finding myself so inspired by learning about cryptocurrency, because, you know, outside of the technology and all of that, that's incredible, and the way it's going to change the world, looking at it from a super abstract, zoomed out view, I'm just like, the capacity for humans to evolve and develop and do insanely powerful things is so empowering. And, you know, we can look at that as inspiration for what's possible. I don't know if it's just cut out.
You're good. I love that.
Yeah.
And what about current favorite mentors, like top 3 that come to mind right now?
I am wait, has it cut out? Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. You can go ahead and say it now.
Okay. Yeah, I've been loving Shay Sundara, and she's amazing, isn't she? Do you know, the funny thing is, when I first started following her, I felt this weird resistance. I was like, oh, I don't really know if I like the way I don't know what it was. And I have really learned, like, anytime I feel a bit of resistance, and it's a different kind of resistance. Like sometimes I'll get an intuitive nudge where I'm like, that's not right. And I'll just find a natural distance to it. But then there's this resistance that I feel the resistance, but I still stay connected to it. And I'm like, why? If you really didn't like it, just unfollow. But I'm like, no, but I do. And so, yeah, when I first started following her, I felt this strange resistance. And more recently, I've been like, oh my goodness, like this woman is everything that is possible for me. And that's why I had the resistance, because it was my ego getting jealous. And like, I think sometimes when you're like on this journey, you almost forget, because you're not constantly battling with ego. When it comes up, it's so subtle that you feel like it's part of you. And so I'm like, oh, maybe she just doesn't resonate with me. And it really was just ego being like, oh, she's so successful, like you're not going to be, you know. So anyway, I've been super inspired by her.
I love that. I love her. Yeah, she was, I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying, because you're not the only person that's ever said that to me about her. Because she was my coach for 6 months last year, and I was like, how do you work with her? I have like so much, like, they're like, I love her, and then there's something about her that just like turns me off. And I was like, there's a gift for you in that then.
Yes,
yeah,
really.
so
Like,
I love that you
really.
touched upon that. Everyone should definitely go see a Shay.
Yeah, she's incredible. And I love the work that Nadine Lee does with Tantric Alchemy. I think she's awesome.
Yes.
And I fucking love Sally Mustang as well. Not that she's a coach, she's just an abs. Like I literally, and it's not even that I'm actively doing this, but there is a particular home that I go to when I imagine me and my partner, when we're finally able to reunite in Australia. And like, I keep trying to remove this attachment, but like my life looks like Sally Mustang's life. And I'm like, I'll be the next Sally Mustang. And, another one that I've recently started following is, I think she's probably got about 3,000 or 4,000 followers. She's called Jessica Torres. And I'm just really, really loving the transmissions that are coming through her at the moment. So yeah, loads of women that I'm feeling really inspired by, actually. And I love that. Like, I really, really love that. So yeah.
I love that. And what is a current favorite mantra?
To be fair, I've been working with a lot of money mantras, and one that has felt very empowering is money wants to be there for me, and money is always there for me. And funny, like at one point I checked my bank account and I had like $11 in it. And I was like, rather than being like, oh my God, I've only got $11, I saw the number 11 and I was like, wow, 11. Because the truth is, like, because of my condition, I'd not really been able to work properly and blah, blah, blah. And I've been living with my aunt. So I've been able to live rent free. I don't have to pay for anything. Everything is provided for me. And so in the one sense, I could be like, oh, you know, but really I look at it and I tally it up. I'm like, okay, so rent, that's at least 1,000 a month. Food, that's this much. And I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, money has been showing up for me. And I haven't even bothered to thank it. I haven't even bothered to realize that it's here. And then like, happens so quick, right? Like literally a few days after having that realization, I get a call from an ex-colleague of my sister's who's a good friend of both of ours. And she's like, oh, I've been following your journey and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, she has her own company and she's offered me a job working from home where I make quadruple the amount of my part-time job. Yeah. And I'm doing something that I really enjoy, and I'm developing this tarot coaching thing, and my e-commerce business is taking off. Like, manifestation is real. Like once you learn to respect that money is very much here for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's been my mantra. It's been sort of focus on these money manifestations, but it's there for me and I love it.
I love that. And who doesn't need a little more money wisdom, right? I love that so much. Thank you so much. And where can people find you and work with you if they resonate with this interview?
So I'm on Instagram. My handle is just my name, Katie Jonzen. Or if you want to follow my tarot page, that's Into the Shadow. I need to be more active on my tarot page, but I'm feeling this strange crossover of like, actually, I want to be presenting as just me.
Yeah.
And I think you had that as well with yours. Like, I love the name Life with Shay, and I think it explains so much about what you do. But I think there's like this subtle but monumental shift when you decide to show up. Like,
This is me.
yeah. So that's kind of this transition that I'm working through at the moment. You know, am I ready to let go of Into the Shadow and truly show up as an amalgamation of the both? Or do I want to develop that a little bit more on the side? Like, I'll see how I go. But yeah, Katie Jonzen or Into the Shadow, whatever resonates more.
I love that. Beautiful. And all of this information, of course, will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Katie. And definitely go follow her and give her a little bit of love. And I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much for holding this space. And one thing I want to finish off with is something that I picked up from you quite a long time ago, where you defined the difference between looking at the universe as a test versus an initiation. That has been something that I've really held with me, and particularly through a lot of the initiation that I've been through, you know, the challenges. Looking at it through the lens of this being an initiation, it's so empowering, and it's such a reminder that the universe is not out to get us. It is really here to support our fullest expression, you know. So that's been something that's been so powerful for me. So thank you so much for that.
I'm so happy, and I like this whole episode will be an initiation for the world. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye. Speak soon.